First step is definitely currency. The second one might be a billing system, and then maybe heroes, meaning the messaging.
Welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast, where experts discuss international content management, product localization, and global expansion. I'm Katerina from Undertow. We create and manage localization programs for B2B SaaS companies so they can grow globally. Today, our co-founder Nicola Calabrese will be talking with Kris from Valueships. I will leave Kris to say his full name. Kris is the co-founder of a boutique consultancy that helps tech companies grow revenue through strategic pricing. In this episode, they will dive into how to build effective international pricing strategies, adapt to local markets, and avoid common pitfalls when expanding globally. Whether you're localizing your product or refining your pricing model, this one is packed with actionable insights. So, let's dive in.
Hi, Kris, and welcome to the Multilingual Content Podcast. How are you today?
I'm very, very good. It's been quite busy week. I'm super excited to be here today.
So I'm really excited for this conversation, but before we jump right into today's topic, would you mind telling us a bit about yourself and what you guys do at Valueships?
So my name is actually Krzysztof Szyszkiewicz, which is unpronounceable. So I go by Kris. By the way, won the prize for the hardest combination of name and the surname in the universe. So I go by Kris. I work at Valueships. I'm a co-founder of the company. We're a boutique consultancy working with technology companies on pricing. So the promise of the companies is to increase revenues by 10% through pricing lever. And then pricing is umbrella word for many different things, right? So it's how you package your products, how you price your products, how you bill your products, what core value metric you are using, and how you're upselling your clients. So pricing, nice umbrella words for many different topics, many different hats.
And as people might have assumed today, we're going to talk about pricing, but
Surprise, no?
Yes. And so let's start for market research. So what methods would you recommend for doing market research to understand how people feel about prices in different regions? Because we always talk in the context of international expansion.
So I will do a very controversial statement here because, of course, user feedback, client feedback is very important. But I think at the very beginning, when you are just starting, this might not be necessary. So if you want to understand how you should price internationally, maybe using the, purchasing power index, how people adopt given technology, what competitors they are, what profitability we might expect, those can be good internal benchmarks that you could use in order to predefine your pricing strategy and then the goals that you are setting in front of putting this strategy in action. Then once you see the results, you can update or align your pricing strategy accordingly, which means that, for example, if you are a SaaS company and you have, free packages, free tiers, and 95% of your clients are actually on the international market, you entered DACH region, for example, are buying the most expensive plan, maybe you're too cheap. Maybe you're giving too much value in the biggest plan versus the price, or too little value in the smaller tiers. So I would say that there is an agile methodology to it, which is testing, learning by doing, but instead of guesstimating by costs, by competition, by value that you are delivering to the clients. So it is one option that doesn't require you to test it with prospective users, but there are, of course, advanced methods that you can leverage in order to understand what should be your pricing strategy. We're going global or entering a very specific market. So methodology-wise, I would say there is Van Westendorp or price sensitivity meter. That's number one. The two names of the same thing, which tells you the pricing corridor. So what is the minimum, maximum, and optimum price? If you already have something in mind, and if you are in the market that is, I would say, more commoditized, maybe a bit easier to compare, there is also a conjoint method, which basically gives you an opportunity to test a couple of different pricings with your prospective users. And then, of course, beyond those two price tags packaging methods, I would say, there are also questions that you can leverage in order to understand, for example, which features are preferable for this market, what billing system you should use in order to increase the conversion. So those are like the primary research methods that I would definitely recommend. Of course, there are different flavors to it because with PSM itself, you can run it in a couple of different dimensions. But yeah, if to research a primary research method, I would start with PSM or conjoint.
Okay. And you mentioned the competition at some point, maybe not necessarily having to look at it, but in general, like, what do you think about like having a look at, especially if you already have competitors in a new market you're entering, how would you like go about, would you consider what they're doing or how you will take that into account?
Yeah, so competition wise, and of course, I don't want to, go asterisks to asterisks. So I would try to keep it simple, but also simplicity. There will be a bit of simplification to it, right? So it's not always that obvious, but I would say like the first thing that I would recommend to use is like jobs to be done to understand what other companies are solving for the same job at the given market. So look at Valueships, for example. We are boutique consultancy. Our claim is about increasing profitability, increasing revenue. But when you think about increasing profitability, you can increase it through pricing, but you can also increase it through sales or through cost cuts, right? So we are not only competing with other pricing boutique, but we are consultancies, but we are also competing with, sales consultants to be precise. So jobs to be done helps you understand what other companies who are not necessarily your direct competitors are solving for the same job. So that's number one. You should understand if you're doing better or worse job. Then you should also understand what pricing action you want to take in order to come up with your pricing strategy. So if you're doing a better job, you can price higher, which means that you're going to win the market that is currently underserved, or you can price lower, which should put you on the growth path, right? So you're basically trying to score the whole market. At the same time, you can make job worse, right? If you're doing job worse, you can price lower again, and then you are serving the market that is currently overserved, right? So people are using the solutions that are a bit too heavy for them, but there's nothing else on the market. That is why they keep paying for that. Or if you have a very specific secret sauce, something that is, available only to you, you can also do job worse, but price higher, right? And one could think what could be an example of a product like this. So think of Wi-Fi in the plane or an ATM, right? So Wi-Fi in the plane is not the best Wi-Fi on earth. Nevertheless, it's an only option that you have on the plane. That's why you're not happy, maybe no, but you will pay higher, right? So if there's something very specific to your product that solves for the very specific challenge, this is one and only option where you can deliver worse job and price higher. At the same time, I would say that I would be a bit more creative here also. So if you have like a direct competitors on the market, most likely you will, then I would think in terms of differentiation, right? So how to make sure that it's not that easy to compare, that you are providing some differentiated value to your prospective clients. So the comparison is not that easy and you can escape like the price comparison situation, but price value comparison situation. This is where you want to be, and you want to make sure that you're delivering a better deal. So better value for price.
And I guess like, especially when going into new markets, not necessarily the competitors have figured that out. Like maybe they're still like testing things that they're not 100% sure about their approach as well.
100%, right? And if you're going internationally, if you're entering any other market, if you're competing with local products, you could think in terms of social proofs, logos that you are having from your domestic market, which makes you actually credible to your users. So I would say, yeah, you're completely right that it doesn't necessarily mean that if you're competing with local companies, you are done, basically, right? It means you can still use your experience to prove that you are worth it.
Also, like when going into a new country, what kind of cultural factors do you think should be taken into consideration? For example, let's say vis-a-vis a currency, for example.
Yeah, so of course, I could go to this academic, it's like not in China for blah, 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 stuff like this. I think we all know that. But in B2B relationships, I think there are a couple of things that are quite easy to follow. So first one, it turns out in most cases that we were working with, it's worth to have at least local currency in place, right? So if you're an US company going to Europe, at least make sure you're going with Europe. So of course, if you want to make it a bit better, if you're going to Europe and you will be in both Germany and Poland, in Germany you can have euro, in Poland you can have your Polish zloty or like any other currency that is available. Number one. Number two, if you're working with freelancers, if your products are more the PLG side, maybe with small customers, it's also worth to consider having a local payment provider that provides you a trust, right? Especially if you're going from like not super well-known market to other not super well-known markets, right? So if you're going from US to Poland, I think most of the people know Paddle or Stripe or whatsoever, right? But if you're going from, I don't know, Colombian market to Poland and you have your Colombian billing provider, maybe having Polish autopay or PayU is the way to go because it might create a bit of a friction. So billing system is the second one. If you want to make it, and if you're like a bigger company and this is a big project for you, I mean, you can also think in terms of willingness to pay, but this is a bit more challenging. So different areas, different regions in the world have different willingness to pay. That comes down again, PPPs like purchasing power index, GDP per capita is the other proxy that you can use. But if you want to make it super duper correct, then I would say that measuring willingness to pay is something that you could think of, which can be that like in US, for example, they have a willingness to pay of X, which means that in Poland it's 0.8x or in Switzerland it's 1.2x or 1.5x, right? So you can adjust your pricing to the willingness to pay of your customers. But I would say that first step is definitely currency. The second one might be a billing system, and then maybe some heroes, meaning the messaging, right? This is what I would consider adjusting. So, better social proofs. Some countries are more cost sensitive, the other ones are more value sensitive. So if you're in US, for example, the value is what I have seen is like predominant. Maybe if you're, I don't know, in Latvia, for example, or maybe in Germany, for example, maybe the aversion to loss or maybe cost savings in terms of the message might be a bit better in terms of your conversion. And then only then if you covered the easy things, I would go with differentiating based on the willingness to pay.
Okay, that makes sense. It's very well structured. Yeah, I see you've been thinking about this.
I've been a consultant for quite a while, so the structure is strong with this one.
And let's say once you have in place a strategy, like what KPI would you recommend to track to see if the strategy is actually successful or maybe if something needs to be changed? Sorry to interrupt your listening, but do you want to grow your B2B SaaS in international markets? Because every country is different, and what users value in one market doesn't necessarily matter in another one. At Undertow, we help B2B SaaS companies like yours succeed in their international expansion. We create customized localization strategies that address the unique challenges of each market. In this way, you can effectively attract, engage, and convert customers worldwide. Visit undertowlanguages.com to find out more. And now back to the show.
Yeah, so pricing, because I don't want to cover the whole GTM, because of course, conversion and number of views, etc. This is important. But I would say pricing wise, especially for technological products, in case you are differentiated, it's worth to understand what is your average revenue per user. That's number one, to understand if actually pricing wise you are within the corridor or beyond the corridor. The second one, on the clients that have already converted, it would be nice to understand expansion revenue. So if your user journey in time is actually properly structured, that's number two. The third one is value. So, you could think in terms of churn. So, for example, if we're promising the value, but for example, given country approaches onboarding a bit different and you should adjust in onboarding. This is the third thing, but maybe pricing wise, not that important. And of course, I would go back to your P&L, right? So I would think in terms of margin, right? So, and the full margin, especially taking into consideration cost of acquisition. Because if it turns out that your CAC is much higher than it used to be in your domestic market, but you just translated the prices, so, $59 equals to, I don't know, 55 or 49 to round it up euros, but your CAC is significantly higher, maybe it requires either the cost efficiency or maybe it requires a pricing action.
Okay, that makes sense. And do you have any example you can make of B2B SaaS companies that actually did it very well when they went international?
So I have a couple of those companies in my mind, but maybe I would use from my domestic market one company. So there's a company that's called Brand24. They're a social media monitoring company, very good solution. And they were scaling from Poland to US. And there are a couple of things that it has been a journey. And this is important. The CEO used to say that it took them too much time, but at the end, the scaling was a very, very good decision. And, couple of points, right? The value they were translating was very important. The case studies with the global brands that they've worked with the Polish market is the second thing. And I think in time, they also adjusted the pricing structure accordingly, right? So there is always this one caveat when you are scaling, especially after some time, right? Because you see that, for example, your international market is converting at the higher prices, but then you have your legacy customers on your domestic market that maybe doesn't have that high willingness to pay, or the market is not that big. The big question is what to do about it, right? That I would treat it with caution, especially at the very beginning. So if you feel like that your global market is performing better than your local market, but still you don't want to lose the revenue from the local market, having it differentiated might be not the worst idea, right? Of course, in time, you should seal it once the international market is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and domestic market is becoming significant, then there is a question, what do you want to do about this? But at the very beginning, I have the feeling that many people think of that pricing can be only one, and it needs to be the same across all of the countries, across all of the market. I rather see that pricing as a process, and not necessarily you need to have everything the same everywhere, right?
Yeah. I think that's one of the main points I will take from this conversation. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to have the same thing.
I hope it was valid. I hope I hope it's actionable,
And the other thing connected to this, so is there any pricing model, for example, subscription or usage-based pricing that work best for B2B SaaS companies entering new markets? Or do you think
of course there's one. You made me do that, right? And I hate to play this card. It depends, right? Actually, I only use it depends when it really depends. So here are some things. So first of all, there is no one model that serves them all. Number one, your model should support and should be easy to understand for your clients, but also should be scalable for you, scalable for your clients. It should be predictable. It should be easy to accept, etc., trivia, right? Nevertheless, we can't forget about the current pricing trends that we see on the market, right? So again, you made me do that, so I will say it. I thought I wouldn't, but there is AI that is quite an important player right now on the market. And with AI, pricing is becoming more and more important, because actually not only challengers, not only incumbents, but also big companies are thinking much more in terms of value. And then we see on the market, right? We used to be in the world of on-premise, where clients were they were using your software, but they were operating your software. So you were delivering the value, but it was not that tangible. Then we moved into the cloud, and you were responsible much more on the software. So tangibility of value was higher. And then when you think about this, if you're charging based on usage, for example, again, you are only being charged when you use, right, the product. So again, the tangibility or contribution to the value delivery of the client is higher, right? And now, right now, what we see is that some of the companies are charging by output. So, instead of getting an access to the software, for example, and if you're in an SEO space supporting other companies to write articles, you don't get a user and an access to the platform, but you are getting the article ready to publish, right? Imagine that, I don't know, it was Google Translate and it was paid. So instead of access to Google Translate, you would be paid by the number of translations that you've conducted, right? So this is the change between the output and the outcome. And then there are even companies that are charging by success, right? So imagine that you are not, in the translation spirit, you are not charged by the number of things that you've translated, but the number of things that, I don't know, I would have understood in Spanish, right? For example, or not myself, but person that you're translating it for. So, charging by success is the other, I think, especially for incumbents, for new players, the players who want to challenge the status quo. This might be quite a challenging journey for them because cash flow wise, it is hard. Product wise, it's also hard. Attribution wise, it's hard. But if you crack the code in terms of success based, which is very plugged into your value, that value that you deliver, then you win the game, at least in my opinion. So I would say there is no one fits them all. You should always adjust to your use case. There are some common truths. It needs to deliver the value. It needs to be scalable. It needs to be acceptable, etc., predictable, etc. Nevertheless, we can't forget about the trends and moving into more output, usage, outcome-based models. And I'm mixing two things here, but on purpose, those are the things that you should definitely consider. And just one caveat here, and this is a real asterisk. The thing here is that this is the trend. It's a hype train that is coming, but I think I wouldn't bet my money, only if I had to, that this trend will win, right? I hope, because it's very plugged into the value and I think it's for good, but we can go full circle and we can end up in the situation that in 3 years we'll be charging by 3 outputs, 20 outputs, and 100 outputs, and we're back into good, better, best again. So this is how I see it.
Yeah, and the outcome-based pricing, actually, the one that really caught my attention was intercom, changing to the number of resolutions that the agent will do rather than the amount of, cases that it handles.
Yes, that's true. Of course, when you think about this, it's intercom charging by the resolution, which is, you can also call it a success, actually. But then at the end, in principle, they're very smart and it's very good. I am a big fan of this model, but in principle, you're being charged when you say that it has helped or you close the chatbot window, right? But what is funny, that I haven't seen a lot of fuss around it. People are not unhappy with it. So I think that it really works. But then imagine that you are telling that you're charging by resolution, but the system is delivering suboptimal resolutions, right? Then people would start to scream, hey, what's going on? Why I'm getting charged? It didn't really push the needle. How we can fix it? So there is beauty to it, but there is definitely, it's not a beast, but a risk to it while charging for those things. And it's not for everyone, right? If you can't prove that this value was delivered by you, and if you're not contributing to the client's success at the end, these models are not for you. It's fine, right? You shouldn't sell most likely shoes in subscription. This model is subscription is typically not for shoes. Not, by the way, it's for it used to be for razors, hi to Dollar Shave Club team, but a surprise. But my point here is that the hype train goes, but it doesn't mean that everyone needs to be on this hype train. It's fine not to be there, right? And this is the message.
And connected to that, I wanted to ask you, what are some of the most common mistakes that you see company making around pricing, especially when going international?
Yeah, I will play this back to the very beginning of our conversation, right? So for the problem number 0, I mean, which is a very hygienic, I make sure that it's right. So basically, I have seen companies are just having errors, like some inconsistencies, not all the whole sub page is translated, blah, 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 stuff like this. The second one is currencies, right? So if you're going to US, I mean, don't charge in euros. I mean, it's very basic, but it seems that some of the companies are forgetting about this. The third one is value, right? So think in terms what really you provide for these customers and if they're sensitive to those challenges, because sometimes your product delivers more than one value, you have more value drivers, but I mean, you need to align with your prospective audience. The fourth one is doing it too early, too late, basically. I have a lot of clients who are actually a bit sorry that they actually done it too late and they could have tried it before, and making it a bit slower but earlier might be not the worst idea. Also, it takes a bit of time pricing wise to find what is the right price for this given market. So give yourself a time, right? Don't act on it immediately, right? I've seen companies that first week, no sales, and they're like, yeah, no, that's tragedy because maybe we're too expensive. Let's just decrease the price. That they've decreased the price, nothing happened because it turns out that the number of visits is so minimal that it didn't allow for any conversion, right? So I would say that make sure to take the decisions if you thought through your go-to-market pricing for a given region before you act on any decision. Just at least take a bit of time to rethink it so you don't act too soon to change something.
Yeah, to make sure that is actually the price in the issue, might be something else completely.
And pricing is easy to blame, right? Because I mean, your product has been there and has been successful in your region, in your domestic market. Then you never blame communication because it's the same communication just translated, so it should work. So like typically by the gut feeling, people are blaming the price. While to be very, very bluntly honest, if you just put a bit of thought to it, I mean, most likely there are some other things that you could reconsider if it's not going right. So pricing is like, easy to blame, but at least my experience, super biased here as a pricing guy, pricing person. But from my experience, it's rarely one and only. It can be, of course, but rarely one and only factor.
But yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised the times I've heard, like, we translated the website, but we had very low visitors. And then when you ask, how are your visitors in your, let's say, home market actually get to the website? Do you do like some ads campaign, or do you have like salespeople that go out and move them to them? Because if you don't have that in the local market, how are they going to supposed to be find? If you don't do SEO, you don't do ads, you don't have salespeople, how are going to people find your website in the whole internet? That might explain why you don't have so many visits. So it might have nothing to do with the website in itself, but how do they get there?
100%, right? So frequently, I see that people took like 1 month to prepare, and then they changed their mind after 1 month thinking process. They changed their mind after like 30 minutes. And in general, not only pricing, but business-wise, rarely it works like that, right? You've been working on something for 1 month, and then, one thing happens, and then it changes the whole model, right? Of course, as long as it's not that like transformative thing as AI or something like that, either you really did a bad job in this 1 month, or this one thing, it's really not the black swan, but it's just anecdotal thing or too early to tell.
Yeah. I mean, and again, if you're going international, you cannot expect it to work exactly as your market that you've been working and refining maybe for years, and you need to give it, like, let's say, some leeway to the new market. And
it's startup within a startup, right?
Yeah, in a way, yeah. In the new market, if you're not known, it's kind of like starting over somehow, especially if your product category is not even known in that market. You might go there and your competition is spreadsheets because you don't really have competitors. That's when I'm thinking about SaaS products in particular. You might go there in that market, there's not much traction because you need to educate the market more about like the need for a solution like yours. It's not just competing with somebody else. So it's a lot of, but I do agree. Yeah, it's important to understand what's the root cause and give it time. Anyway, like 1 month, yeah, that doesn't sound like a long time to decide that definitely pricing is the thing to change.
Sample one is typically not a good sample.
Yeah. And so it was, before we wrap up, where can people learn more about what you do and what Valueships do if they want to get in touch?
Thanks for the question, by the way. So, in Valueships, as mentioned at the beginning, we specialize in pricing for technological companies. When it comes to knowledge, I publish a lot on LinkedIn, so I'm more than happy to see you all at my profile, happy to be connected. We also have a very cool content on our website, especially under report section. We're trying to publish, at least on the quarterly basis, some reports that are region specific. If we're planning a go-to-market to Nordics, to DACH, to Benelux, and we have dedicated report to those regions. And there's also a contact form there. So both LinkedIn and Valueships website work. And then when it comes, I really like to recommend maybe some reading material. So of course, the world is moving quite fast, but fortunately pricing is, of course, it's a bit of an art, but also it comes down to numbers, and it's much more a science, at least in my opinion, than it is an art. So I would say that, still things that were applicable 60 years ago, cost plus, you should measure your cost to understand the margin. There won't be 180 80 turn here, which means that some books are, I think, very relevant. So I would say dollarizing value, if you're into the value and how to calculate it, by Stephen Diozu. There is also some books by some very good books by Herman Simon, Pricing Man. There's also a price advantage book by McKinsey. So a couple of great readings that I would highly recommend.
We'll try to put everything in the show notes, the Valueships website and your LinkedIn contact, and the readings that you recommend.
Yeah, you can put the QR there, because if people are typically, when you're, for example, posting videos, you have when people stopped watching your video. So typically people are stop writing my name on Z. Because they're no, it doesn't make sense. And there are a lot of Zs. So if it's the last Z, because my surname ends with Z, that's good. But rarely that's the case. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll try to put the link so it's easier to tap it or click it and get it.
That's nice. That's nice.
It was really great having you, and have a lovely day.
Thank you very much. Have a great day. And let's be in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. The Multilingual Content Podcast is powered by Undertow. We help B2B SaaS companies grow in any language. Get in touch if you want to know more. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episode. If you want to support us, remember to give 5 stars to the podcast. See you next time.